Trump's tariff things. You know, a lot of people I know have lost their jobs over that. And
it's serious, yeah.
And I hope that his turnaround happens very quickly because people have suffered enough.
President Trump, as a longtime supporter of your mission and to make America great again, I want to be a part of that with you. But we e-commerce companies all across the United States, we need more time. Give us a 90-day off-ramp to get off of our China goods and just tell us the plan.
You just heard from two of many high-profile Trump supporters that are suddenly expressing doubt about some of his policies. And I've got to say, for Roseanne Barr, it's interesting to see her suddenly be so skeptical about Donald Trump, given how just a couple of months ago, she was talking a lot of shit. In fact, she made a cringeworthy, quote, rap video with Canadian rapper Tom MacDonald, gloating about how we won, you lose, deal with it. But now all of a sudden, she's not so sure about Donald Trump's policies. But her, as well as Stephen Borrelli, who you also heard from, aren't alone, because another Trump-supporting celebrity recently expressed a little bit of doubt about Trump. For example, in April, rapper Azealia Banks tweeted, "Okay, I think it's time everyone who voted for Trump admit that we made a fucking mess. Like, this is an absolute disaster." I'll say. There's also FreightWave CEO Craig Fuller, who admitted, "I enthusiastically supported Trump's victory in the November election. I thought I was voting for pro-business policies and small, targeted, and incremental tariffs that would encourage the production of strategic industries to return to the Americas, i.e. what we got in the first administration. I did not vote for a neutron bomb to wipe out supply chains and small businesses 100 days in." And then there's Charles Koch, who spent millions against Trump in 2023, only to then pivot to spend millions in support of his agenda, specifically the tax cuts that he'd benefit from. But he's already flipped again because a group linked to his Koch network is now suing the Trump administration over tariffs. And he recently said that the country was a mess while implying that Donald Trump was indeed the culprit. So I think that the lesson here is that no matter how rich and famous you are, the leopards will still eat your face if you vote for the leopards eating people's faces party. The question is whether or not these high-profile examples of Trump regret are indicative of a broader trend that's happening in the country. And there's debate about whether or not this phenomenon is more of a media creation, since stories about Trump supporters regretting their votes are more likely to be sensationalized. But we do finally have a little bit of an answer here, because data indicates that the leopards have indeed feasted since Trump took office. Martha McCarty of Newsweek writes, Navigator Research's poll conducted between April 24th through 28th among 1,000 registered voters found that 1 in 9, 11% of respondents who voted for Trump in 2024 regret having done so. Another 16% do not regret voting for him, but were disappointed. Among those who identify as moderates, 47% said they regret voting for Trump or are disappointed by his early performance, while 43% of Trump voters who do not identify as MAGA said the same. But the vast majority, 73% of Trump voters, neither regret their vote nor feel disappointed by his first few months back in the Oval Office. Only 13% of MAGA Republicans said they regret voting for Trump or are disappointed by his early performance. So expectedly, Trump's core base is still with him for the most part. But having said that, these numbers are still genuinely shocking, because the takeaway is that 1 in 4 Trump voters either regret their votes or they're feeling disappointed. Already in May. I mean, we're not even 6 months into this administration yet. Usually the first 6 months to a year, that's the honeymoon period for new presidents, and they can do no wrong according to voters. But if we're already seeing this much regret, I mean, I'd be curious to know what this number is a year from now. Also, 13% of self-identified MAGA Republicans either regret their votes or they feel disappointed. That is significant, because that tells us that 1 in 10, more than 1 in 10 Trump voters are already against what he's doing. And we're talking about self-identified MAGA here. So I think that we have to reserve judgment until we see additional polling. But I mean, if this is true, it indicates that the Trump cult is actually starting to shrink, which is a very positive sign. But overall, when you differentiate between the actual Trump cultists and the normies, obviously, the normies who voted for him are much more fickle, and they're much more likely to feel buyer's remorse than the cultists, obviously. In other words, even though regretful Trump voters might get a disproportionate amount of attention, I don't think it's accurate to say it's just a media creation at this point. And when you take into account how historically low his approval rating is, it's clear that a sizable portion of the population has had a change of heart suddenly. But up until this point, we've only talked about the celebrities and CEOs who no longer like Donald Trump because it affects them in a negative way or their friends in a negative way. But I want to hone in on the regular working class people to try to figure out what made them flip in particular. And, as we go through various examples, I want you to look out for something that they all share in common. So let's start with Jennifer Pigot.
If you could say anything to President Trump now, what would you say?
I expected better from you. I really did. I expected that you would do what was right and cut waste and fraud and all of those things that you promised us before we elected you in office, but you're not doing that. You're creating a disaster, and I don't know what America is going to look like if this continues.
Did you ever think that your job would be impacted in a Trump administration?
No, absolutely not.
Jennifer Pigot was abruptly fired from her job at the Treasury Department's Bureau of Fiscal Service here in Parkersburg, West Virginia, along with 124 other probationary employees. She'd voted for Donald Trump and thought her government job would be safe.
But to cut the knees out of the working class Americans just doesn't make sense to me. It's what's the checking account look like, babe? We went through our list of items on our budget and said, what can we get rid of? And we've gotten rid of all of those things, including cable. I had my last review on the 31st of January, and I had the highest rating that you can get on a review, less than 21 days before I was terminated for my performance.
Tough break. So she is one of many federal workers who have lost their job that we've talked about on this program, despite knowing that Trump's goal was to destroy the federal bureaucracy. I mean, this was outlined very clearly in Project 2025, so I think it's naive of her and people like her to think that they were going to be spared because they were loyal to Trump. Sure, a lot of Project 2025 hinges on loyalty to Donald Trump. But if you're trimming the fat, so to speak, in bureaucracy, you're obviously risking being a casualty yourself. But she rolled the dice and she got fucked over. But even though losing your livelihood is terrible, and I feel bad for her despite making that terrible decision, you can always find another job. Other people who supported Donald Trump have had their lives ruined. And the things that have happened to them, they will never be able to recover from. For example, a woman named Brooke Choquette, who voted for Donald Trump, was traumatized after ICE detained her husband, who's a green card holder that also supports Trump, for an old marijuana charge that he had. I mean, she told reporters that she thought that her family was safe, but that obviously wasn't the case if they found some reason to detain her husband, who has a green card. There's also Deborah May and Martin Verdi, who voted for Donald Trump specifically because they liked that he was going to be tough on undocumented immigrants, but they were shocked to find out that their son, who's a legal immigrant and green card holder, was detained by ICE. It was heartbreaking to them for obvious reasons. There's also Leanne Payez, a Cuban Trump supporter who feels betrayed by Trump after she voted for him. Then he deported her husband, and now she's forced to survive on just her income and find a way to support her paraplegic son as well as her 3-year-old daughter. And if you're struggling to find empathy for these people, I get it. It's a self-inflicted injury, sure, but even though they made idiotic, selfish decisions, I still think it's important to show these people empathy and compassion, especially if they understand why they were wrong. I think that we all make mistakes in life, maybe mistakes not that bad, but I would want grace if I made a mistake, and I'm sure you would too. So I think that, understanding that they fucked up, there should be room for compassion. In some instances, I think it's funny to laugh at Trump supporters who fucked around and found out. Sure, I get it. I've done that myself. But the family members of Trump supporters, like in these instances, who were deported or detained, they didn't deserve to suffer because of the decisions that their family members made. Like these people who were deported or detained do not have the right to vote, so they couldn't have made the decision that their family members made. So I don't think they should be punished for having Trump supporting family members. I have Trump supporting family members, and I think it would be arbitrary and mean to punish me for something that they did that I disagree with. So even though it's understandable to feel frustrated, we shouldn't lose our sense of humanity in the process. Now, with that being said, if they refuse to learn their lesson, I think that's a different story. For example, we recently talked about Bradley Bartell, a Trump voter whose wife was detained on their way back from their honeymoon. And even after Trump's policies fucked him and his wife over, He never expressed regret for his vote. In fact, his wife also feels the same way even after being detained, saying, Trump's like one of the most intelligent people in America. We can tell because of all his good business and all the achievements that he has. I'm pretty sure he's smart and knows what he's doing. I was scared that any of those gang members or murderers that are coming to the country without any authorization would attack me or my family. Oh, lady, he's talking about you. He's trying to make it seem as if people like you are murderers. The people who he's accusing of being murderers are people just like you who came here for a better life. Why are you buying the bullshit when you are in this position? You have firsthand experience, not only being an immigrant, but being detained, and you're still cool with them. I don't get it. So, I mean, these kinds of people that are simply too fucking stupid to comprehend how their own politics is detrimental to their well-being, I think we should save our scorn for those types of people, as frustrating as the others are too. But I mean, I can't derive any schadenfreude from a woman who's a single mother, even if she voted for Donald Trump, because that pain and suffering, I don't think that you deserve to feel that for the rest of your life for making a terrible decision. You know, I also feel bad for the parents whose son was deported, even if they were hoping that he'd crack down on undocumented immigrants, because even though there were signs that Trump was planning to take on legal immigration as well, I mean, it's still sad. It's sad. I feel bad for their son, and I take no pleasure in their suffering. And I don't think that anybody else should either. Having said that, I'd love to know what was going through their minds when they voted for Trump, because he's doing things that he said very clearly he would be doing when he was on the campaign trail. So, so many people seem genuinely caught off guard by his policies, and I find this astounding. Like this Trump-voting soybean farmer in Kentucky who penned an op-ed for the Free Press begging Trump to end his trade war with China because if not, it would kill his farm. But then there's also this small business owner who tried to farm sympathy on TikTok after telling people that Trump's policies would take him out of business, and he was asking for help, but he was seemingly stunned by the lack of sympathy that he received in response to telling people that he voted for Trump. And now he's getting fucked over by Trump's policies. Just watch the first video, followed by the second video that he posts, which is his response to people reacting to him saying he voted for Trump, and now he's fucked over.
All right, I hate asking for help. I'm not asking for any handouts, but I'm a small business owner that is directly being affected by the 104% tariff that has been put on China. I import alloy wheels for cars, and I do somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 15 containers a year, which is a small business in regards to this industry. At 104%, I am absolutely going to implode and will not last 6 months. So with that said, I'm asking, is there anybody out there that has connections with manufacturing facilities, specifically alloy wheels, either in the United States or outside in these lesser tariffed countries like Mexico, Indonesia, Thailand, India? I need to find another source. I've emailed a lot of these companies and cannot get a response. And I just don't know if it's because I'm a small business or what exactly it is. So if anybody's out there that can help or shed some light, maybe provide some information that would be helpful, I would really greatly appreciate it, because if not, it's just a small business here that's going to go under, and I'll be back to digging ditches again, which I'm not scared to do, but it's a little harder to do with a wife, 2 kids, and at 45 years old.
I love this for you. I love this. Nice. I love this for you. I love to see you fail. I love to see your family be affected and hurt because you voted for Trump. Yeah, I voted for Trump. Absolutely. Did I know he was going to increase the tariffs? Yes, I did. However, I thought that the infrastructure would be set up prior for small business to come back to America and manufacture in America. So to wish ill on someone and to love the fact that they're suffering, to love the fact that their family is being negatively affected because I didn't vote the same way that you did, is fucked up. It really is. It shouldn't matter. Anyone that enters my life, I'm going to judge you of who you are, how you are as a human being. Are you kind? Are you polite? Are you sincere? That's how I judge you, not who you voted for. I've got far left-leaning friends. I got far right-leaning friends. It doesn't matter to me. I like you based on who you are. But to see someone hurt and their business fail and their family be affected because they didn't vote the way you did, It's fucked up. I'm sorry, a lot of you are fucked up. I'm sorry. We should all care about each other regardless of who we voted for. I'm sorry. I hope you guys can be better people.
Okay, I take back everything I said about not deriving pleasure from other people's pain, because fuck this indignant asshole. Your vote was a vote to destroy other people's lives. Mass deportation, rolling back segregation-era civil rights protections, the federal erasure of trans and non-binary people, a destruction of the social safety net, significant cuts to Medicaid. You voted for suffering, fuckface. You did that, and the people in your comments are pointing out that you're now getting a taste of your own medicine. And now is as good a time as ever to remind you that earlier in this video, I asked you to look out for something that all of these people have in common. By now, I suspect that you can kind of see a pattern emerging. All of them who voted for Trump that are now expressing regret or disappointment, they didn't feel buyer's remorse until they were personally affected by his policies. It's why the dickhead we just heard from can't fathom why people would take pleasure in his pain, because even though his vote caused immense pain and suffering for other people, he wasn't able to comprehend how Trump's policies would be hurtful and cause pain to him directly. And therein lies the fucking problem with Americans, okay? A politician can literally explicitly promise to kill an entire group of people, and Americans wouldn't give a shit about that. It wouldn't even register on their minds so long as they thought that there would be something in it for them or it wouldn't affect them personally. We are such a selfish society. We'd happily sacrifice our immigrant friends to Trump's Gestapo if it means we could save a buck or two on eggs. And I say that because that's kind of what Americans did in this last election. Trump ran on deportation, and they signed up for that, and now they're seeing how they're getting fucked over by other policies that he's pushing, and now they're upset about Trump's policies. It's so frustrating. Don't get me wrong, economic anxiety is real, but that doesn't mean that you get to suspend morality for self-serving reasons if you have economic anxiety. I mean, that's preposterous, right? But I mean, this is ingrained in our capitalist culture. We are conditioned to be selfish and individualistic and not care about the communities that we live in. And it's now coming back to bite us in the ass in a serious way. I've got more examples. USA Today let Trump voters sound off in their opinion section, and even though the people that they talk to don't necessarily regret their votes, they are unquestionably disappointed in some aspects of Trump's second term. For example, Brian Bullerman of Iowa says, "I voted for President Donald Trump because I assumed he'd grab the bull by the horns like he always does." I don't even know what that means. "And on some things he has, but if I'm being honest, what he's done on Social Security is a real letdown. I can't say I feel hopeful on that, so that part bothers me. I wonder why it must affect you. I think the man's crazy, but Senator Bernie Sanders had a very valid point about expanding Social Security benefits. Yeah, no shit." There's Pierre Dubb of Tennessee who writes, "I support the effort to manage our borders, especially with regard to illegal drugs. I support seeking to force China into fair practice behaviors, but what Trump has accomplished the most is sowing chaos. I expect us to go into a recession due to his practices with tariffs." There's Rebecca King of Texas who says, "Trump is dismantling and destroying the things that made America great. Our founding fathers created America to be a constitutional republic. That is specifically what elevated America's glory above other countries and gave a unified pride to its citizens." Yeah, Rebecca, I agree with you. If only there was some indication that he was undemocratic. You know, if it wasn't the insurrection that he incited, maybe it was him basically saying he wants to be dictator on day one. That could have given us a hint, but, you know, maybe you didn't detect it. Maybe it was too fucking subtle for you, Rebecca. Sorry, I'm trying not to be a dick, but it's just very, very frustrating. Now, to be fair, not all of the people that they talk to express disappointment with Trump. Some of them, you know, even if they admit that things have been off to a rocky start, they seemingly trust the process. And we're talking about more long-term voters. But Yahoo News published a report from Christian Piaz of Vox, who spoke to more normie-type swing voters who voted for Trump for economic reasons. And what they say is also very interesting. There's 37-year-old Sharita White, who voted for Biden, but during his tenure in office, her life just kept getting worse. She lost her husband, then her job, and ended up voting for Donald Trump. But just 8 months later, she already regrets her vote because things continue to get worse for her, and she realized realizes that Trump isn't delivering economically in the way that she thought he did in his first term. There's also 61-year-old Jose, another Biden to Trump voter who supported Trump this time because of his stance on immigration, but already feels betrayed by Trump for sabotaging the economy with his dumbass tariffs. Then there is Nikita, a college student and first-time voter who pulled the lever for Trump, who's also feeling buyer's remorse due to concerns that he has about the economy as well as the stock market. So sadly, none of these people even factored in Trump's authoritarianism or how his policies would negatively impact immigrants and trans people. Their calculation was almost purely based on selfishness. That is disgusting and demoralizing. But that self-centered approach is what all of these people seem to have in common. And even though it might make you feel uneasy about the culture that we fostered here, it is nonetheless insightful. I think that Democratic Party politicians need to reorient themselves to capitalize on the inherent selfishness of voters. Try to make something good out of it. You know, as leftists, we have to start reconditioning people to see themselves as part of a bigger community so they don't make votes based on self-centered reasons. They have to see people as a community whose fates are intertwined. That's going to take time, but in the short term, it's clear that these people are mostly concerned with their own material well-being and literally nothing else, which explains why so many of them already regret their votes for Donald Trump, because they thought things might get better by pulling the lever for the opposite team, and it didn't, so now they're back to being demoralized and disenfranchised. And I think you're going to have people in this country that go back and forth every election until things get better, because one party doesn't do what they need to do, then the next doesn't, and so on and so forth. And we keep going back and forth as we circle the drain. You have to have a party that actually addresses these material concerns, so that way maybe they're not so selfish in their votes. Maybe they don't feel like they're a paycheck or two away from bankruptcy. You know, therefore, since we know how selfish voters are, to win them back, the Democratic Party knows what they need to do. It's pretty simple. They've got to improve the material conditions of the American people. And they can't just promise to do it. They have to do it. And it can't just be incremental. It has to be systemic. You know, give people Medicare for all, and that is thousands of dollars in their pockets every single year. Cancel their student debt and medical debt, and that's going to make them more secure. Repeal the Faircloth Amendment and build public housing so that way they're not spending every fucking penny that they have on rent. I mean, if you do these types of things and you deliver for voters, that is going to mitigate the threat of fascism, at least a little bit. I mean, how do you think FDR basically saved capitalism from itself? He did social safety net programs that improved people's material conditions. Now, that's not going to change the fact that a large portion of the American population voted for Trump because they like that he hates immigrants and trans people, and they hate immigrants and trans people too. And Democrats are never going to win those people back, no matter how much they pander to them. But there are still a lot of Americans who, sadly, are going to overlook fascism if they think that there's other things to be gained despite fascism or racism or xenophobia or transphobia or all the other isms and phobias. They can put aside their aversion to that if they're averse to it, to vote for a fascist or a racist if they think maybe there's something that they'll get. Those are the people that, as frustrating as they are, aren't yet too far gone. It depends on the person, right? But I think that it's incumbent on all of us to make those kinds of people class conscious. Give them the common enemy that they want to hate if they don't already hate some group. Oligarchs. You know, if they're going to vote based on vibes, we've got to try to give them the vibes that they want. That's how we win. And as time goes on, more and more Americans are clearly going to realize that they fucked up by voting for this man. So we've got to do our best to try to use this as an opportunity to guide them towards a more empathetic, anti-capitalist, compassionate form of politics to save this country. That is, of course, if it's not already too late, because, you know, when you vote for somebody who wants to kill democracy, you might not be able to undo that. So even if you want to press a collective control Z for the country, it might be a little bit too late to put that cat back in the bag. Nonetheless, if we're going to have a chance, we have to try to make people be less selfish. Otherwise, we are fucking doomed.